You wake up, check your phone, and within 3 seconds you've already absorbed at least 6 unspoken judgments. Someone got promoted. Someone's skin is clearer. Someone's dog is somehow more photogenic than you on your wedding day. And now you feel small, not crushed, just quietly erased. A silent sigh from your soul saying, maybe I'll try again tomorrow. Welcome to the prison of perception. The funny part, the bars are imaginary, but you still rattle them like they are titanium. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Terrifying not because of who you are, but because of who they might think you are if you dared to show it. Most of us don't fear being seen, we fear being seen wrong. So you cure it. You contort. You adjust your laugh in group settings to be 11% less loud. You agree with things that make your eye twitch. You nod like a bobblehead with a PhD in people-pleasing. Why? Because you're stuck in a psychological hall of mirrors, reflecting everyone else's expectations back at you. Here's the Jungian twist, those mirrors aren't real. They are projections, little mental ghosts that live rent-free in your head, whispering, they won't like that. Better not. Jung called it the persona, your socially acceptable mask. And yes, it's useful. But wear it too long and you forget it's a mask at all. You start believing you are the version of you that never upsets anyone, never disagrees, never says no, that's not harmony. That's self-erasure dressed up as maturity. Historians still argue whether Jung's concept of the persona was a critique or a survival tactic. The truth is, it's both. It keeps you alive in society, but it also slowly kills your real voice if you're not careful. Ever noticed how exhausted you are after a social event where you kept the pace? That's not social fatigue. That's spiritual claustrophobia. You didn't just make small talk, you smothered your true self with a polite pillow. Let's try something grotesquely honest. Imagine if your inner voice got projected onto a giant screen at dinner. Every sarcastic quip, every "this is fake" vibe, every moment you screamed inside when someone explained crypto for the 47th time. Most of us would die of shame. But that projection, that's you. The unfiltered you. And oddly, that's the part Jung wanted you to meet, befriend, even love. Because here's the brutal paradox, the more you chase approval, the less you ever feel it. Approval that's bought with self-betrayal is counterfeit. It's like emotional monopoly money. You keep stacking it, but you can't buy peace with it. So what now? Burn your bridges. Shave your head and yell, I am sovereign, on a mountaintop. Not yet. First, notice the way you armor up before speaking. The micro-calculations, the second-guessing, the pause before texting back so you don't seem too eager or too cold. That's the persona's fingerprint. When you start spotting it, you can start questioning it. Ask, who is this version of me designed to impress? Whose ghost am I trying to keep happy? Because most of the time, we are not trying to please real people. We are haunted by internalized echoes, your 8th grade teacher, your emotionally unavailable parent, that one ex who said you were too much. And here's where things get beautifully bleak. Even if they loved you now, it still wouldn't fill the hole. Because it's not about them. It's about the part of you that doesn't believe you're worthy unless everyone's clapping. Jung believed that true freedom comes from individuation, becoming whole by integrating all your parts, not just the likable ones. You don't become free by being admired. You become free by being authentic, even when it gets you weird looks. Even when it costs you likes. Even when your mom passive-aggressively says, you've changed. Which, by the way, is often the most backhanded compliment a person can receive. And if you want a dark little joke to soothe your bruised ego, here's one. Trying to be universally liked is like trying to be everyone's favorite flavor of baby food. Bland, mushy, and best forgotten after infancy. The moment you realize you'll never be universally approved of, and that it's not a tragedy, you're free. Finally free to speak from the gut. To feel out of sync and not spiral. To disappoint others without feeling like a criminal. You begin to see social disapproval not as danger, but as data. You stop interpreting someone's discomfort with your boundaries as a referendum on your goodness. You start seeing it for what it is, their growing pains, not your moral failure. You don't need to punch through the mirror. Just stop thinking it's the sky. That's Jung's first cure. So now you know the mirror isn't real, the applause doesn't matter, and your persona is a perfectly ironed straitjacket. Good. But here's where it gets inconvenient. Because if you're going to step outside that cage of perception, someone's going to call you the villain. And not in a cute Disney villain with good eyebrows kind of way. In the you changed and I don't like it kind of way. Ready? Because the truth is, in order to stop caring what others think, you will, at some point, have to let someone else think you're selfish, or cold, or difficult, or ungrateful. You'll be cast as the antagonist in someone else's play. And the moment you stop begging for a role in their fantasy, that's the moment you start writing your own. Carl Jung called this integrating the shadow, the terrifying and freeing act of owning the parts of yourself that were once exiled. The anger, the ambition, the the desire to say no without a spreadsheet of justifications. Let's sit in that for a second. There is a version of you who does not shrink to fit, who does not explain every choice, who leaves the room without permission. That version of you isn't broken. She's not selfish. He's not cruel. That version of you is just tired of acting. And integrating the shadow isn't just accept your flaws and move on. No, it's deeper. It's recognizing that what you thought was a flaw might actually be a feature. That your ability to walk away when others claim is not detachment, it's discernment. That your anger at injustice isn't too much, it's the immune system of your soul flaring up. Historians still argue whether Jung meant for the shadow to be embraced fully or simply observed. But the most powerful people you know, they don't just acknowledge their shadow, they dance with it. So, let's dance. You get invited to a dinner where your ex will be. Your shadow whispers, let's skip it. We've evolved past overcooked salmon and unresolved tension. But your persona kicks in, be mature, be cool, be fun. You go, you smile, you implode internally. Meanwhile, your inner villain. She's sitting at home in a robe, sipping tea, watching reruns of Succession and loving herself. You know what? Maybe she had a point. Let me give you a script. One that no people pleaser wants to hear themselves say, but should try once, preferably in front of a mirror while pretending they are on a gritty HBO drama. I'm okay with being misunderstood. Try it. Again. Slower. Like it's the first sentence of your emotional emancipation proclamation. You don't need to be liked by people who love only the echo of themselves they see in you. The villain archetype is crucial. Why? Because society trains us to avoid conflict, to soothe others, to apologize for needing space. But the villain chooses self-respect over social comfort. They say the hard thing. They exit the chat. They don't dress their no in sequins and jazz hands. This isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming whole. Wholeness is messy. It's inconvenient. It doesn't fit into Instagram captions or corporate mission statements. Wholeness is boundaries, teeth, a backbone. Here's a bit of Jungian gold. The most dangerous psychological mistake is the projection of the shadow onto others. Translation: what you hate in others is often what you deny in yourself. Hate someone's arrogance. Maybe you're afraid to earn your confidence. Despise someone's silence. Maybe you're afraid to speak less and be misunderstood. Cringe when someone posts too much of themselves online. Maybe you're afraid you want that same level of visibility. So the next time you feel judged, pause. Ask, is this about me or about them seeing something they've exiled in themselves? Or even better, is their opinion of me a rejection of my shadow or just proof I'm finally touching it? Here's the kicker. You can't become your fullest self without someone disapproving. It's inevitable. You might as well choose who it's going to be. Spoiler, it can't be you anymore. And for your regularly scheduled dark joke, becoming your authentic self is like rebooting your life as the villain in other people's origin stories. And honestly, that's their sequel to write, not yours. You want to be emotionally free? Start by letting your inner villain speak once a day. Doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe you don't respond to a text within 5 minutes. Maybe you say, I don't agree, at brunch. Maybe you unfriend that one person who keeps posting passive-aggressive quotes like it's an Olympic sport. Every time you choose yourself, even in a whisper, your shadow softens. She trusts you now. She doesn't have to slam doors to be heard. And when you integrate that part of you, the selfish one, the angry one, the one who actually enjoys solitude, something beautiful happens. You stop craving permission. You stop mistaking kindness for silence. You stop performing empathy just to keep your ticket to the approval club. You realize being the villain in someone else's story just means you finally stopped being the ghost in your own. You're sitting across from someone who just asked for your time, your energy, your silence, your forgiveness again. And you feel it, don't you? That familiar tug. The one that says, be nice. Don't make them uncomfortable. If you say no, you're the bad guy. So you hesitate. You give. You nod. You contort. Again. But something deeper inside you rolls its eyes and sighs, seriously. Welcome to the moment your soul gets tired of your manners. Carl Jung would call this a misalignment of self. In simpler words, you betrayed yourself. Again. Not because you're weak. Not because you're broken. But because for years, love meant accommodating other people's chaos like it was your duty. Let's get something straight. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are cartography. Maps you draw so you don't get emotionally lost every time someone else brings a storm. And yet, when you try to draw them, you feel guilty. Like you're leaving someone behind. Like you've committed a relational war crime for not answering a text at midnight. Here's the truth no one tells you when you start healing. Guilt is often the first sign of growth. It's the bruise where the old self clings. It's the ghost of a former you whispering, but we used to let them walk all over us. Yeah, you did. And look how that worked out. Let's make this painfully practical. Someone you love, maybe even a parent, demands access to your emotional landscape like they own the deed. They want to vent, lash out, or subtly belittle. But you've changed. You feel the quiet urge to say, not today. You hesitate. You freeze. You smile, but your insides want to take a nap for 13 years. Let me give you a phrase. Memorize it like it's sacred scripture. I don't have the capacity for this right now. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't beg. It just acknowledges a truth you've been ignoring for decades. Emotional bandwidth isn't infinite. You're allowed to spend it wisely. But why does this feel like betrayal? Because somewhere along the way, you were trained, like a golden retriever in a self-worth circus, that love equals self-sacrifice. That saying yes makes you good. That swallowing your needs earns you heaven points. Jung wasn't subtle here. He warned that over-identifying with the good self, the helpful, giving, always available persona, is actually a way to avoid confronting your full humanity. He believed that wholeness requires the opposite, owning the parts of you that say no, not now, and not anymore. And here's where things get morally confusing. You're going to disappoint people on purpose. You're going to let texts sit unread. You're going to skip the call. You're going to say, this conversation isn't healthy for me, and walk away. And people will get mad. Some will call you distant. Others will call you selfish. One or two may stage a full-scale emotional protest with sad eyes and cryptic Instagram quotes. But here's the darkly funny part. The healthier you become, the worse you'll feel at first. Because guilt is how control systems react to collapse. You've built your entire identity around being liked, agreeable, strong enough to handle it. And now, you're choosing rest, silence, detachment. Your system doesn't know how to compute that without setting off the fire alarm. Historians still debate whether Jung would consider boundary setting a spiritual act or just healthy individuation. But does it matter? In a world that rewards self-abandonment and labels it virtue, every act of emotional self-defense is a revolution. Now, let's be clear, boundaries aren't brick walls. They are doorways with locks. They say, I decide when to open. I decide who enters. I decide what I tolerate. You're not punishing anyone. You're honoring your nervous system. Let's make it simpler. Here are 3 scripts for real-life situations. Friend wants to trauma dump without asking. Can I pause you for a second? I don't have the space to receive this right now. A parent guilt trips you for missing a call. I care about you. I just needed some quiet. It wasn't about you. Coworker overshares or invades your space constantly. I'm working on being more intentional with my energy. I might not be as available, but it's not personal. These are not betrayals. These are tiny, sacred revolutions. Because once you start setting boundaries, something else begins to happen. The people who benefited from your lack of them will protest. Loudly. They'll say you've changed. You have. They'll say you're not who you used to be. You're not. They'll say you used to let me take from you without question. And that's the point. Let me serve you a little shadow-flavored joke. When you stop being their emotional buffet, some people will starve because they never learned how to feed themselves. You are not a vending machine for comfort. You are a human being with limits, value, and a right to protect your peace without issuing a 12-page apology. Carl Jung believed that boundaries weren't just personal, they were essential to the psyche's development. When you say no, you're not closing doors. You're opening inner ones. You become someone who no longer needs to be everything to everyone, just someone who is, finally, enough for themselves. And the freedom, it's deafening. No more second-guessing every no. No more rehearsing texts 17 times to avoid sounding cold. No more emotional hangovers from saying yes when your gut begged, please, God, no. You get to walk away now. From the chaos. From the guilt. From the role of the eternal comfort giver who never asked, what about me? Draw the line. Then cross it, back into yourself. You're halfway through a conversation and realize you're not even in it anymore. Your body is nodding, smiling, making polite noises, but your soul, she's in a different country, ordering coffee under a fake name, wondering how she got roped into this again. This is what it feels like to disappear. Not dramatically. Not with fireworks. Just slowly. Like fog slipping under a door, unnoticed. And you do it every time you ignore that inner pulse, the one that says, this isn't you. Carl Jung would call this dissociation a spiritual crisis disguised as politeness. You're not zoning out because you're rude. You're zoning out because you're not present with yourself. Here's the part that stings. The more you shrink to fit others, the harder it becomes to locate your real self. You don't just lose your voice. You lose your coordinates. And this, right here, is where choosing awareness enters the chat. You've probably heard people toss around the phrase like glitter, I'm just so aware now. Cool. But awareness isn't an aesthetic. It's not a vibe. It's not something you slap on a crystal and manifest your way through. It's a discipline, a discomfort, a daily choice to stay, to stay in your body when conflict arises, to stay in the moment when rejection stings, to stay with yourself even when everything inside screams, just shut down again. It's easier. Jung didn't promise awareness would feel good. In fact, he hinted it might feel like hell at first. Because once you become aware, you lose the delicious convenience of denial. You see everything. Your patterns, your cowardice, your chronic over-explaining, the way you say maybe when you mean no, the way you laugh at jokes that aren't funny because silence feels more dangerous than pretending. Historians still argue whether Jung saw this level of conscious discomfort as liberation or simply necessary pain. But one thing's certain, he believed wholeness was impossible without awareness. And let's be honest, being awake sucks sometimes. Because suddenly, you can't blame other people for everything. You realize your empath energy was often just unbounded codependency in artisanal packaging. You see that your "I'm just trying to help" reflex was, occasionally, a secret hope that if you healed them enough, they wouldn't leave. And your dark little reward for this spiritual X-ray vision. You get to sit at family dinners where everyone pretends nothing happened, and you, the newly awake one, feel like the only sober person at a drunk table. So here's what you do instead of panicking, you choose awareness over performance. Moment by moment. Let me give you a tool. It's painfully simple. No incense required. The 3-second check-in. You're mid-conversation. Someone's unloading on you. You feel that numb floaty thing start. Before you drift, ask. 1. Where am I? Literally, am I in my body? 2. What do I need right now? A pause. A boundary. A breath. 3. Am I choosing to stay or just enduring? This check-in doesn't fix everything, but it puts you back in the room. Because here's the plot twist, people-pleasing isn't just about being liked. It's about avoiding presence. If you're focused on performing, you don't have to feel. But awareness, real awareness, makes you feel everything. The anger, the grief, the little triumph when you say, I don't agree. It's like upgrading from a grainy black and white film to Technicolor, gorgeous, but overwhelming. Still, you must choose it. Over and over. Because every time you stay awake, even when you want to dissociate, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And yes, sometimes awareness looks like sitting in the car after an interaction and realizing you betrayed yourself again. Sometimes it's crying at a text that shouldn't hurt, but does. Sometimes it's walking away from someone who once felt like home and realizing you were never really there, only your projection was. Here's your dark humor dose for the day. Awareness is like suddenly discovering the house you live in is on fire, but you are the one who lit it, and now you have to calmly redecorate while it burns. But here's the beauty in the burn. Awareness lets you stop pretending. You stop needing to be good all the time. You just need to be real. You can say, I'm not okay right now, but I'm staying with myself. You can walk into a room and not shapeshift to match the vibe. You can survive someone not liking you and realize it didn't kill you. That's when the shift happens. Your presence becomes the boundary. You no longer need to announce it. You just are. You become the person who no longer leaks energy trying to be digestible. You show up as you, full-flavored, no filter. And the people who can hold that, they stay. The rest, they drift. Not because you pushed them, but because awareness reveals the real compatibility underneath the performance. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Awareness breaks the spell. It stops the loop. It hands you the pen. You don't disappear anymore. You don't perform. You don't abandon yourself at the altar of being palatable. You just sit in the moment and say, I'm here. And that's enough. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble. Even if the only person who notices is you. Because you noticing is the whole point. So here you are. No mask. No script. Just you, awkward, unfinished, possibly overdue for therapy, but finally real. And now the question hits you like a notification you forgot to turn off. If I stop caring what people think, do I still care about anything? It's a terrifying moment. That in between. You've broken up with validation, but haven't quite moved in with inner peace. You're floating in the middle, unsure whether you're healing or just getting really good at emotionally ghosting everyone. This is where people confuse detachment with numbness. And to be fair, they look similar at first glance. Both involve fewer emotional earthquakes. Both make you less reactive. But the difference? Numbness is a shutdown. Detachment is a choice. Carl Jung once warned that spiritual bypassing, using metaphysical fluff to avoid real psychological work, is like mistaking a coma for meditation. You're not enlightened if you've just stopped feeling. You're not free if your peace requires total disconnection. Real detachment means you still feel, you just don't fall apart every time someone else drops their emotional laundry on your floor. And that's where ego death comes in. Not as a psychedelic buzzword, but as a daily practice of surrender. Every time someone misjudges you and you don't correct them, that's ego death. Every time you walk away instead of over-explaining, ego death. Every time your family stares at your boundaries like you just slapped their soup out of their hands and you don't crumble. You guessed it, ego death with a side of mashed potatoes. Historians still argue whether Jung fully endorsed ego death in the Eastern spiritual sense or saw it more as a metaphor for the dissolution of identity en route to wholeness. Either way, the result is the same. You become harder to manipulate, but softer inside. You lose the reflex to prove, but gain the ability to witness. You care deeply, just not indiscriminately. Now, let's make this excruciatingly practical. Because right now, someone somewhere is breathing down your neck, maybe literally. A boss, a partner, a sibling who thinks you owed them closeness, and your gut says, I need to pull away. But your brain counters, that's cruel. That's abandonment. That's mean. Let me offer you the world's gentlest permission slip. You are allowed to love people and still detach. You can wish them well from a safe emotional radius. You can care without carrying. You can walk away without declaring war. And here's your script. Save it. Whisper it. Write it on the back of your phone case. I love you, but I choose peace. Or if you want the deluxe version, your perception of me doesn't belong to me. I return it to you with respect. Will it make them angry? Maybe. Will it make you the villain? We covered that. Will it make you feel like a terrible person for 5 whole minutes? Probably. But then, something else happens. Silence. Space. Breath. You realize you don't miss the drama. You don't crave the chaos. You don't feel the ache to be understood anymore. You've made peace with the misunderstanding. Here's your final dark joke for this emotional tour de force. Emotional detachment is like unsubscribing from a toxic newsletter you used to read daily. At first, you worry you'll miss something. Then you realize it was mostly ads and guilt trips. You are not cruel for choosing stillness. You are not cold for walking away from heat you didn't start. You are not broken for needing peace more than approval. Carl Jung said that wholeness isn't about being perfect, it's about being complete. That means you, with all your contradictions, the part that wants to connect and the part that needs silence. The part that wants to be seen and the part that hides for safety. The part that cares deeply and the part that lets go. You stop needing to defend yourself. You stop rehearsing how to be. You stop scanning rooms for signs of danger, approval, or unspoken resentment. You just are. You walk into family gatherings, awkward silence in tow, and smile, not because it's perfect, but because you're no longer auditioning. You show up in relationships unarmored, not because you trust them fully, but because you finally trust yourself enough to leave if needed. You sit alone at a coffee shop without checking your phone every 3 minutes because your own company is no longer a punishment, it's a sanctuary. You become untouchable, not because nothing hurts, but because when it does, you know it won't own you. That's Yin's final gift, not a prescription, but a practice. To live as if your worth isn't up for public vote. To love without addiction. To feel everything and still choose peace. And if you still think this is too cold, too distant, too harsh, remember, you're not detaching from people. You're detaching from illusions, from the fantasy that everyone must like you, from the myth that being soft means saying yes, from the lie that you owe your sanity to every emotional tornado that knocks on your door. Let them think what they want. You're not here to be decoded. You're here to be free.